Hello folks, this is Johnny again, and today let's talk about the reverbs I like to use on the drums, specifically but not limited to the snare. Let's just listen to the mix again, and I'll mute this snare reverb track and you can hear the difference it makes. So you can hear it adds a lot of ambience and space to the snare and makes it sound bigger and more interesting. So let's solo the snare. Let's see what I'm doing here. For this particular track, I used an impulse response that comes with the free reverb impulse pack from 3 Sigma Audio. It's a drum room medium. In general, for snares, drum rooms and especially plates work very well because plates sound very dense and powerful and focused, and they can really help to extend that massiveness you want from the snare, or at least in this form of music that we are working in. You want to have a massive snare. But for this track, I felt like this particular reverb adds some nice character, some interesting spacey character to it. It's not quite the same as other reverbs that I tend to use. So what's important here is the pre-delay. I like to set it somewhere between 20 to 50 milliseconds, give or take, depending on the song, depending on the snare, depending on the feel I want to get out of it. This is pretty important because, as you can see here, that impulse response also has a kind of initial high build-up up here. And then you have this tail off down here, and then this last bit down here. I like to separate a reverb into these 3 sections in my mind and then process the reverb in a way that I put each section to the best effect. Now, in that initial build up here, you don't really, or I personally don't want that to add into the impact of the original snare track. Rather, I want to extend the impact of the snare. So I have the initial impact on the original track here, and then the reverb comes in just this little bit later, these 40 to 50 milliseconds, and by that, it extends that impact, and it makes the snare sound bigger and fatter. And then all the rest here stays pretty much at default settings. Sometimes I also like to use the epic verb from Variety of Sound. It sounds a bit splashy and a bit thinner in the mid-range, the lower mid-range and the low end, so it works well for more fast-paced styles. And for a slower, more heavier song, I tend to use the IRL by Waves. It has a plate reverb that sounds so beautifully massive. But as always, also just experiment with what you have at hand right now. You don't need to go out and buy plugins to get the best reverb it's possible. A reverb doesn't make or break a mix. It just adds character. And then after the reverb, I like to put some EQ to filter out some of that low end and lower mid because it can get pretty ugly down there. Let's take off these 2 so we only have the reverb. Listen to this. Nah, when I do it like this, the reverb only adds a lot of low-end mud and not a lot of character to the upper mid-range at the top end. Nah. Rather, I want to filter some of that low end, so then I can also keep the level higher. By that, that whole lower range stays focused, and the upper range comes up, and the reverb gets a bit more apparent. Yeah, Yeah, sometimes I do it like this, but usually most of the times these days I do it like this. So I lower the range that's most ugly. Yeah, and then I don't have to filter too much down here. So this works a little bit better, I guess. Okay, and then after all that, I like to put a bit of compression. Because let's get the reverb in here again. I want to compress this top region a little bit, so the mid region here also can come up a little bit more, and by that you extend that power of the snare even more, and it just sounds bigger without messing with the decay time. And let's check that with and without the compressor. So yeah, something around those lines. And at times, what I also like to do is put a gate as well. So let's check this out. Really slow release. Perhaps put a bit of a hold in there. Hang on. Let's put this even slower. So by doing this, you basically cut off that last piece of tail. And when you want to have a more overproduced and really modern sound, then this helps to clean stuff up that you don't really notice anymore in the mix, and it doesn't really add too much to the mix. So in effect, with the dynamic processing here, you're basically changing the shape of the reverb from going linear to a bit more curved. Something around those lines. And it just gives it a bit different feel later on down the line. So that's it for the snare reverb. Just a short and quick run through so you get the picture. And then let's take a look at my drum reverb here. So for this mix, I'm sending the overheads and the room mics to this one. And again, depending on the song, I also send other stuff there, like the hi-hat and the toms, a little bit of the kick perhaps. Really depends. And this in particular can, again, help to add this touch more space to the whole drum kit. Which may sound a little bit weird because I'm only applying it to the overhead in the room. But especially because in the room, you still have the whole drum kit in there. It basically adds also ambience to the whole drum kit. It makes... I'll just show you. So let's solo all of this and see what's happening. You notice how the cymbals get much more smoother with this, and they get this touch more space and ambience, and by that you perceive the whole drum kit to have more ambience, although you're only applying it to these two tracks, and I really like this trick. So let's see what I'm doing here. And here I'm using a short plate reverb from Reflector. I bought me this from Native Instruments some time ago. But again, you don't need to go out and buy new stuff. Just first fiddle around with what you have. And when you notice it's not doing what you want, then you can consider getting new stuff. And after this, again, some filtering, but I don't compress this one because it's just the cymbals going in there and the whole track is very washy, so I don't need to compress it really. But I'm also only really doing this with a more modern mix. If I'm going for something a bit rougher sounding and more edgy, I don't use any reverb on the overheads or the rest of the drum kit. Just some snare reverb, and then the rest comes from the room mics, which is also pretty important to my drum mix. And that's it for this video. This was, again, just a quick run through about how I approach reverb on the drums. I hope you got something out of it. If not, I'm really sorry because I'm really stressed out right now and I'm having a cold. So I'm gonna have to keep this a bit more simpler. And then we'll see you next time, I suppose.